Alright, what's up YouTube? This is going to be another how-to video. I'm going to be walking you guys through how to make a website. I'm going to be doing everything from the way that I would do it, and I will be doing it through using all the AI tools that are out there. It's a very different place that we live in, that now we have access to all these different tools. But coming from someone who has experience making web applications without using AI tools, and I also have a PhD in computer science, you're gonna see what it's like from my perspective on how to create a website. So I don't use any tools like Shopify, Wix, WordPress. I usually start designing it from scratch. So if you are someone who wants to learn more about making websites using like code, maybe you're a software engineer that's starting to get into making websites, or if you are a computer science student, or if you're anyone that wants to get into like programming and all that, this video is for you. But if you are someone who maybe just wants to make a website very quickly, maybe you want to start an e-commerce website, you want to just sell some products online, this video isn't for you. You're more than welcome to watch the video and learn. But for practical purposes, if you want to create your own website, I would go and use Shopify, Wix, WordPress, Google Sites. I only have experience using Google Sites, and it's very easy to start making a website. You don't need to know how to do any code. In the future, I'm going to be making videos on comparing what it's like to create a website using code, programming, designing everything from scratch versus doing something from like a Wix website or Shopify. I'll probably start with Shop just to start off. But what we're gonna do in today's video is that I'm going to just walking you guys through the process of making a website. So maybe, let's see. So we're gonna start pretty simple. What we're gonna do for this video is make a e-commerce website. So if you are someone who just wants to learn how to get into making websites, the easiest thing you can do is just make a basic e-commerce website. Next to that, it would be like doing a blog website. But e-commerce it's more likely, I think, in my opinion, that when you go to find a job to work with someone, it might be to do e-commerce or to make their website for them. Which is, it'll be pretty easy to start off with for this video. And then in future videos, we're gonna be going into more advanced like AI features. So I work as a AI research engineer at Research Cyber Infrastructure for the university here in Hawaii. And I create chatbots for clients who want to put a chatbot or get into AI and put it in front of their database. So one of the websites that I can teach in the future is how to make those chatbots, which would be pretty fun. So, okay, with AI tools, I think it's really important to know what you're doing first. You have to get your thoughts onto maybe a piece of paper. Maybe you have to start designing something just to see what do you know and how to structure your thoughts on what you want to build. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using Figma to kind of plan out how I would start designing the architecture. And then I would go to something like ChatGPT to figure out to validate whether the system architect that I built is correct or not. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so here I have a Figma board. I'm gonna have a front-end client, and I'm probably gonna be using React for this. So I'm gonna write here React. I'm gonna use Tailwind CS. So Tailwind, I don't really have too much experience with building, but I know whenever I try to ask AI basically what tools to use to create whatever I'm using, it usually suggests Tailwind CSS. So that's what I usually go with. And the reason why you want to use what the AI is already familiar with. So I know that I'm going to be using TypeScript, and that's pretty much it. That's for the back end. I'm going to be using Node.js. Probably the libraries I'm going to be using is Express. Maybe I'm going to have this Node server is going to have access to a database. So I'm going to have a database here. Maybe I'm going to use SQLite because that's pretty easy to use. It's going to be a big application. This is So this is where I'm going to be storing like all the things like photos, product descriptions, titles. This is so this is all the data that I'm going to be storing for the application. And I'm going to be using that arrow here just to show that I guess this doesn't really, the arrows don't really matter because they're all, I don't really understand what the arrows mean when people are designing these types of applications because you're just sending data back and forth anyway. I guess it matters when you are explaining like how the data is being moved from server to front end to database. So let's just say the user is going to be served this data and then this is going to go to the user, and then we're going to have access to several cloud, maybe just a couple, I think. So I don't want to deal with handling logins. So the reason being is I'm not a security person. I don't know all the things that are needed in order to provide a very secure website. I know that you need to store the passwords, you need to hash it. I know all the maybe like the basics, but to keep up with what is widely used in the modern age, I don't really want to deal with that. So I would offload some of that handling the user logins to some sort of service. So what I would use for that is, let's see, I would use Firebase, which would have like Google OAuth, and then so when people come to my e-commerce website, they're probably going to be using their credit cards, and I also don't want to deal with handling credit card information. So I would offload that to something that's a little bit more secure, which would be Stripe NPM. So Stripe is let's see, it looks like it. I'm trying to look for the website, but this kind of looks like it. Payment, and you gotta have some sort of API key and so on. Okay. So Stripe handles all the payments that you're gonna be processing for your applications. I think they take I don't know specifically. I guess we could take a look at it right now. Stripe website documentation. Maybe that's what we gotta look for. So Stripe documentation. Let's go maybe price default. So every successful transaction is gonna be 2.9% of the transaction plus 30 cents. I would set it up. I mean, there's probably other ideas or other platforms that you could use that I'm not aware of. Maybe we can do a quick search on ChatGPT, but this is what I would probably start with, collecting payments from an e-commerce website. So we're probably gonna use just these two. Maybe let's do some coloring here just to make everything look a little bit nicer. Let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it. So so now that we have maybe some sort of idea of how we're gonna set up the architecture of what we want to be building, I would go to ChatGPT and say, I want to build a e-commerce website and show me an entire architecture. Let it do its thinking. Let's see, high-level architecture. We're gonna have visual description. Imagine a diagram layered from left to right. You have your client, edge, backend, services, your data with arrows. So let's look at this side by side with what I have. So it's saying I need a CDN. So from what I know, a CDN is, I don't know what it stands for, Content Delivery Network. So a CDN, from what I understand, you saw it a bit there, it's basically when you have data that you're retrieving from a database, and I think you're going to be caching it to a storage that's closer to you. For, I think the purposes of this e-commerce website, we're going to hold off on that for now. It's telling me to use an API gateway, it's also optional. It's something, I think you would put that right here on the node server is going to be serving the front end client. So you would put that like right here. So whenever traffic would be going to, so you're also sending traffic this way because people are connected to your website. That's what I don't like about these arrows. But you are requesting data from your node server, and before it does that, it's going to be hitting this API gateway, which I think it just handles it's just another layer for the clients that are trying to reach the backend. And in this layer, you can do certain things to block people or to do a quick, let's try to test what I know from from API gateways. Requesting services in backend and acting as a reverse proxy to route requests to appropriate services. So wait, is API gateway is not a load balancer, but it can incorporate some load balance function on basic load balance requests to different backend services. Eliminate. Why is it not a load balancer? Distribute network traffic across multiple servers. API gateway acts as a single entry point for all API requests, providing a centralized point for managing, securing, and routing API traffic to various backend services. So what it seems like is if you were to have multiple Node.js services, maybe you have like a microarchitecture website, something like, whoa, this is not that. We're not gonna get too into that. Well, let's look at Netflix microservices. Doesn't actually show you it. So microservices is if you have like multiple services that are all doing like a single thing. So maybe you have one that's for running AI functions, one that's just like fetching data from a database, and then one it just handles, instead of using this cloud service, you have one that just handles login. Then you would use this API gateway to route traffic to in front of each one of those services that would horizontally scale to all these. If you have multiple of the same servers doing the same thing, you can distribute the load to multiple servers. So we're not going to be using these, mainly because I don't know how to do it, but I don't think it's needed because I've created websites that don't really depend on these, and maybe the services that the tools that I'm already using kind of have these embedded somewhere into like how their system works. I just learned how to use Nginx. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I was using Nginx as a proxy just to serve my web page on a port that can be publicly hosted using a domain name. I didn't know that it was also a load balancer. So some of the tools that you're already using are kind of like implemented into, or like it's being represented as like some of these other things. Like if you just use AWS, I think that when you use AWS, it kind of handles this in the background anyway. So front end, this is a headless storefront, calling APIs. Headless make rapid UI easier, iteration easier. I actually don't know what this is. Headless e-commerce, a guide to decouple e-commerce. Splitting your monolithic e-commerce app, 2 separate versions. Okay, so we're not going to be using this either. So from what I know, headless is a system that it's just a way to run a program that doesn't need a window like a UI to see. But the front end, we're gonna be building a front end. The back end, we're gonna be using, use a microservice architecture. But if you're working with a big team and you want to distribute all of these services to you have multiple teams that are working on all the different microservices. For someone like me who's just making this video, this isn't going to be a huge system, and I'm only one worker. If I had maybe like 30 workers or 20, I would probably consider using a microservice architecture. But there's also some talk, I think, about whether a microservice architecture or a monolith. So a monolith architecture is basically, instead of using multiple node servers that are doing each, doing one for AI, doing one for checkout, doing one for payments, instead of a microservice, you would be using a monolith service, which you would put everything in here. Which, again, for someone like me who's building this on my own, I'm not working with a big team, I'm just doing this for testing, this fits what I'm trying to do. And that's also not to say that doing a monolith architecture with a big team isn't going to work well. It very much might work. I know from my lab, one of my coworkers was telling me that Netflix changed their microservice architecture to a monolith because I think when they tried to examine all the services that they had to run Netflix, it was a bit of a mess, and it was a bunch of spaghetti. It's also a term that we use in programming. Spaghetti code is basically when your code isn't organized. So it was kind of difficult for them to manage because there was too much complex services going all around, and they couldn't figure it out. So you kind of have to examine what you need, whether you need a microservice or a monolith architecture. And it's also context dependent. I think that for certain applications, a monolith might work better with a smaller team, and a microservice might work better with a big team or a small team, depending on the context. Okay, so async and events, a message broker. So this is probably something that we would want to design. I see this as kind of like a load balancer. So as these events are coming in from the user and they're making a request, like they want to see a bunch of pages, and maybe you had 1,000 users that are trying to access your node server, and they're all pulling different products from your database. There's going to be a point where your application can't handle all of those requests, and some requests might be lost. So we could do that. We could do something. Maybe this is, I would probably put this right here, sync, and hold on, see. It would go somewhere in here. Yeah, right here. Let's put that right there. So what you can do, maybe let's put it right here. Okay, so when the user, so async and events, I think this is also useful for if you want to send events from your backend to your front end. Maybe you have like a countdown, or you're waiting for something to finish, then your backend can send some data to your front end. So I'm trying to think about like events and like why you would need this. You probably would need this in an e-commerce website. So take for example, you're doing a big launch, and then you advertise that, you know, you're doing this big launch, and if you log in to my website, you sign up, people are going to be waiting in a line, and you have a queue for people who are requesting a certain item that you're selling. So whenever your backend releases that item, like it pulls up the curtain and says that this product is available, whoever is signed up on your front end, whoever's waiting on that queue, is going to be sent that event. Yeah. So storage and data, we have a database here. I'm using SQLite. They are suggesting to use Postgres, Redis for sessions and caches, S3 for the images assets, Elasticsearch, searching. So another thing that we can do is that we can take advantage of AI to do better searches, to do semantic searches. So the products and titles and descriptions that you're storing on your database, what you can do is turn those titles and those descriptions into some kind of numerical representation. I did a whole video. You can check out my first video that I made on my channel that explains what a RAG system is, from stopping your system from hallucinating. But you could definitely use RAG in this instance where you just want to build like a search interface. So if you looked at that video, or if not, basically you would just grab the title number, turn it into, like, say you had a bunch of products. Each one of those products you give them a number that's corresponding to the meaning of their descriptions or titles, whichever ones you use. Whenever the user searches for something like baby clothing, maybe that's the product that you're selling on your website, then the system, when you set it up this way, it'll turn the user's question into a numerical representation and try to find these products that are the closest to it. Yeah, and then you can probably, you can definitely set a threshold for how similar of those clothing items that you want to retrieve from the backend. Or you could, we could keep this simple. I can turn this right here, where you could just do a basic keyword search, where whenever you do searches on the front end on the database, you would just look for whether those titles or descriptions contain the word that the user is searching for. Okay, so let's move on. We have payments. It's telling us to use Stripe or PayPal, which we pick Stripe. Background workers for order fulfillment, email, fraud scoring, reconciliation. What does this mean? Are these like the workers who are actually doing the order fulfillment? I mean, hopefully, I think you would probably be doing the order fulfillment. Emailing, that would be considered things that you would do in your Node.js backend, I believe. So you want to probably be collecting some kind of metrics on who's accessing your website. So I would probably do that also here. Maybe we can make a can make some notes here. I'll just do that in here. Metrics, sorry, emails, and metrics. And then it's telling us to use Docker in Kubernetes or serverless. So Docker is a container. Let's see if I can explain this. So Docker is basically, from my understanding, it's just a way to turn your application into this little product here, where you can run it on any machine that you want. So the problem with building out systems is that when you're doing like development work and you are trying to get your system to run on someone else, another developer who maybe is building another microservice on the back end, and they need the service that you're running. So instead of just sending them your GitHub repository and say run this, you would tell them to pull this image from Docker, which is a it's a container that knows how to set everything up that can run on their machine. So you're not running into like dependency issues or like certain situations where your machine isn't compatible with the dependencies that you are downloading on or using in your website. So that just makes everything easier. So yeah, we could do that. We could do this. I would probably put that. We would probably be doing that. Nope, I don't want that. Maybe putting that here. I don't know if the front end needs one. Okay, let's see. What else do we need? Okay, so I'm gonna be breaking it there. So we recorded for 40 minutes. So, I mean, I hope I have some information. I hope I gave some information on what is useful and what is not useful for when you're building a website, at least for the architecture point of view. I'm gonna try to upload these videos every day, just walking through, making this website from scratch, using AI. So I also didn't mention this. I'm using Cursor and Windsurf to build this e-commerce website. This video is definitely gonna be on the longer length because I'm trying to explain all the concepts of what is needed and what I think is not needed. And there's definitely some points in there that I don't know. Like I don't know everything about designing this website, but I at least I can share or illuminate some concepts in there that can get you started. Yeah. If you like this video, please give this video a like. You can comment down below if you liked it or what kind of videos you want to be seeing in the future. I'm gonna try to put out videos every single day. Maybe record like 30, 40 minutes. This is probably going to be cut down into a 20-minute video, hopefully. I mean, if you guys want to see long-form content, you guys want to see more short-form content, you can let me know in the comments. This is a new channel, so I'm just trying out some new things, trying to get into YouTube, making videos, providing education for y'all, and yeah. So yeah, please subscribe to the video, and then I'll see you guys next time. Peace.